Do you ever feel stuck? The alarm goes off and you think, is this really my life? Do you wish you could douse your relationships or your career or even your business with rocket fuel and throw a match on it? End the blah once and for all. They either launch or they burn up and you get to start over. I've been there and I see you. I'm Ben Walters, an entrepreneur, pastor, coach, and consultant. If you're ready to get unstuck and ignite your super pumped life or business, I'll give you the rocket fuel and the match. All you have to do is light it. In today's episode, I'm excited to share with you how you can take a bunch of flute-playing losers and build them into a cohesive winning team. Here's the backstory. Our three kids attended a Cincinnati public school magnet school, and it was a German language school. And this school was known for many things that it did well. It did language, obviously, super well, because that's in the name, but it also did the arts and performing arts, visual arts. It was just a very creative school. But the one thing this school was not good at, and not good at all at, was sports. Their sports teams were awful. And the Catholic schools here in Cincinnati just steamrolled this artsy little public school. And it was hard to watch as a parent. Your kids would go out there with all the best intentions and they'd get beat 13-0 in soccer, or they'd be down 45-3 at halftime in basketball. And so they were just getting crushed. And these Catholic schools are well known. They've produced all kinds of athletes in the NFL, the Major League Baseball, WNBA, all over the place. So no shame in that. But anyway, it was a really negative experience when you put your kids into that and they just get crushed every time. And practices were rough. You'd see the kids, disengaged out there, and then the coaches are screaming at the kids, and it just wasn't a good scene. And all the kids were miserable, including my own. And I can remember they would be like, do we have to go to practice? Do we have to go to our game? I don't feel well. That excuse. I think my stomach hurts. And I'd be like, no, I don't think it hurts. I think it just hurts to get crushed every game. And so anyway, I'm on the sideline with the other parents. And that's a whole thing where every parent on the sidelines thinks they can do it better than the coach. And if you're that parent, you need to check yourself a little bit. But I was being that parent and talking with some other dads, and this just another beat down at the hands of these other schools. And so I said, guys, I'm thinking maybe I should coach next year, because it was my oldest daughter then. And I thought I got two more in this. And this, if I have to do, kindergarten through sixth grade of just beat downs all 3 seasons, I might lose my mind. And one of the dads started laughing, and he's like, really? He's like, you're serious? And I said, well, I think so. And he said, these are the biggest bunch of flute playing losers you will ever assemble. And that phrase just stuck with me. And this has been years. He said, they're a bunch of flute playing losers. And he said, you're crazy. Now, once he said that, I thought, okay, it's been laid down. The challenge has been laid down. It's kind of like a double dog dare, right? You better step it up. I double dog dare you, Ralphie. And so I thought, all right, next year I'm in. I'm going to be the coach. And so I can remember the first practice distinctly. One kid said, coach, I'm only here because my dad says I got to get a little exercise. And another kid said, how long do we have to be here? Another kid said, I hate this. I just want to be home playing video games. And so that's kind of how it began. And so I began to think, okay, this isn't great right now. So how do we turn this team around from a bunch of flute playing losers who don't want to be here, who are getting beat down? How do we get them to start making sweet music? How do we start getting them to be a cohesive team and to begin to have some fun and win and have some success? And so the first thing that I focused on was, let's have fun. This is youth sports. And so often today in youth sports, and we could do a whole podcast or a whole series on that, but the adults just sap the fun out of it for the kids. They're out there playing a game. It's fun to kick a soccer ball on a beautiful spring day, or when the leaves are turning in the fall. That's a good time, or at least it should be. And so let's start making this as fun as we can. And let's start focusing on having fun in the process, not on the results. So you don't come out of the gate and say, this year we're going to go 6-4, which for that group would have been a monumental victory. So you don't focus necessarily on what the result is you're aiming for, as much as the process. So how do we make this fun? And one of the first things we did, we started to play soccer golf. And so I always kicked the first ball and you would basically boot it out there somewhere. And then each of the kids, just like normal golf, would take their tee shot. And the first one to hit the ball that was put out there as the hole, if you will, won the hole. And then the reward for winning the hole was that kid then got to kick the ball to be the target for the second hole. And so we would do this as soon as 2 or 3 kids had assembled for practice. We'd start playing soccer golf. Kids are joining as it goes. You're starting with 2 or 3, and then just as the parents roll in and drop them off, they're engaged right off the bat. They're coming flying out of the car, cleats on, shin pads on, and they're into soccer golf. And we basically played soccer golf all over the place. So not just on the soccer field, but we might boot one up into the hills of Cincinnati or down a hill into the woods. And that was a whole lot of fun trying these crazy shots. And so the kids began to have some fun with that. But along the way, guess what? Each kid was kicking the ball and kind of keeping the ball on their toe and getting some sense of control, which brings me to my second point with how we started to turn this thing around. We stopped talking things to death. We started doing things. So I have seen so many coaches where the kids huddle up at the beginning of practice and the coach goes on this Vince Lombardi diatribe about the meaning of soccer and sport. And the kids, you can just see them, they are completely cashed out. They could care less what this guy's rambling on about or this woman. So they sit there and they get the meaning of sports. Or the team does something wrong in practice and it's circle up and everybody has to listen to 5 minutes of the coach rant about why we're not running the drill correctly. The other thing they do is sometimes it's a singular line for a shot. So one kid lines up to take a shot on goal and they shoot. And then we go to the next kid and then the next kid. Well, do the math on that. So in these types of practices, a kid may actually only be with the ball on their toe, I don't know, 50% of the time, 30, 20. So how are you going to get better at anything if that's what you do? They say 10,000 times of doing something, you will become proficient. You will become an expert at that. So my thought was the more times these kids do what they need to do, the better they're going to become. And that's a lesson that occurs in business too, because so often we think about we need another meeting and we need to discuss this more. Well, every minute we spend in meetings is time we're not doing whatever the work our organization is tasked to do. Every minute we spend in meetings not doing any things and talking it to death is times we're not spending getting better at our craft, getting better at our service, delivering our service. And it's the same thing with this group of kids. Funny thing happened. The more they began to repeat things, the better. Now, I want to give one small caveat is you can do 10,000 things wrong 10,000 times and you're not going to be proficient at it. You have to at some point correct yourself, but you don't need to stop the whole group in order to correct one person. So coach them on the side, work with them, explain, okay, yeah, here's how you're striking the ball. You got to get that plant foot a little more planted, or if you want to loft the ball, you got to lean back because otherwise you're just going to hit it straight on the ground, that type of thing. So coach them up as part of it. And it's the same thing in businesses. Coach your people up, but let them do stuff. I also see this in training. So often we bring a new employee on and guess what they do? For the first week, they just watch their trainer do their job. That doesn't help anybody. Have you ever been that person who has to sit behind a trainer while they're doing tasks on the computer and you're behind them watching? You literally want to walk out the door and say, oh my goodness, this is awful torture. Somebody must have me on film because they are torturing me today. And yet so many managers do that. Whatever the skill is, it could be in fast food. Here, let me show you how to make a salad. And they do it and they do it again. And all you do is stand behind them and watch. Or here, let me show you how to vacuum 10,000 square feet. And you walk around behind them watching them vacuum 10,000 square feet with a backpack vacuum. Again, not helpful. The only time you really learn it is when you're sitting in the cockpit on the computer for that particular skill set, or you're the one making the salad, or you're the one vacuuming the building. That's how we learn the things. And it's the same thing with a team is the more we repeat these things, the more we do them and do them well, the more we're going to learn the skill. So that's the second thing. The third thing is build community. That's an important thing. You think about a soccer team. Let's say most teams, youth team, you got 11 players on the field during games. You might have a roster of 15 or 16 players, right? So you can't do an 11v11 scrimmage unless you build a bigger community. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, okay, if you want to do an 11v11 scrimmage at the end of practice so you can get a lot of kids involved, then you need 11 on one team. You need your 5 other players if you have a 16-person roster. And then you've got to have 6 other people. Could be parents, could be siblings. One of the coolest things that I'm proud of is that the brother of one of the boys in our son's grade had a younger sister, 3 years younger. Her name's Dee Alexander. So shout out to Dee today. She was obviously a girl and she was significantly younger, but she was one of the people in our community. And Dee was a baller, right? You could tell right from kindergarten, Dee could play sports. And she was just 4-time Ohio Miss Basketball. Incredible. She is a dominant force. But back then, as a little, probably 3-4-year-old, she'd say, Coach, can I play with the boys? And I'd say, sure, Dee, jump in there. And man, Dee got after it and Dee brought the game. And then you'd see parents, they're like, I want to play in scrimmage. And so parents then are playing and kind of reliving, their youth. Sometimes you'd have older siblings, younger siblings. And so you begin to get this whole community. And then the other thing we did to build community is every time it was nice, we tried to go for ice cream at least once a week after practice. So practice finishes, hey, we're heading up to go get ice cream. Now, not everybody came every time, but man, what a great community building event that was to just sit around the tables, get to know the parents and the siblings and the other players a little bit better, hear what's going on in their lives. And so you began to build this kind of community that wanted to support one another, wanted to be together. And that's an important thing in your business. How do you build community? Not just here's the tasks we're doing, but how do we have some fun along the way? How do we build invested people that want to do this? Another important point is develop other leaders. One coach can only do so much. So you have a coach and assistant. You're still pretty limited. But man, what if you have other parents that are shagging balls so that ball quickly gets back on the toe of that player? And what if you have siblings who are maybe 3 years older and already know how to do Brazilian toe taps and they're showing the kids? So you got one with 3 kids over here, another one with 2. Maybe your better players become kind of your team leads and they're bringing those younger guys or those maybe less skilled players along on some of the skills. And that's how you develop a team, is by developing a group of leaders. If you just have a singular leader or a couple of leaders in an organization, it's hard to really build a strong organization. And the last thing I want to talk about is game balls. So that's one of the things we did. I would call it public recognition. We celebrated the victories. Now, we tried to recognize this wasn't just the best player every time. In fact, the best player got recognized probably about as often as any of the other plays. So we tried to think of something we could celebrate each and every player on that team about. So, it may be that a certain kid on the team won the science fair or was the lead in the school play or won the chess competition or made a great play on defense at a key moment in the game. So it was both on and off the field, these game balls we gave out. And everybody loved game balls. Sometimes we'd get busy in practice and I'd forget to do game balls. And boy, they'd rally around and say, Coach, we forgot game balls. And I'd be like, you're right, we did. It's the same thing in your organizations. And you can call it whatever you want. You can call it shout outs. You can even do that just in a simple manner. In a drive-through fast food business, we had even gone to the window and just leaned out to the customer and said, boy, isn't Micah a fantastic ambassador for our company? Isn't it great to see Micah's face every day smiling and taking your order and doing everything? And then, so you're praising him, but then the customer will be like, you know what? This is the best part of my day. I love seeing Micah every single day. And so it's a double win when we do those game balls in our organizations. So these are some of the things I want you to think about. Success will follow when people have fun and get invested in the process. And this cuts across all different kinds of things. Like I went to a church, so I'll tell you a little quick side story. When I was in seminary, I had to do a year-long pastoral training, kind of practical experience. And so I ended up being placed in a church that was really struggling. And the reason they were struggling was because they had spent 3 years with 2 pretty clear goals. It was to get their money or their finances to a self-sustainable point and to get their numbers in the seats to a self-sustainable point. So that were the goals, and they were laser focused on those goals. But over the course of trying to reach those goals, it became not fun. It became not spiritually fulfilling. And it sapped that joy out of being a community of churchgoers. And so when I came to that church, the first thing I said is, how do we have fun with this? Forget all the stuff we've been doing. Forget all the pressure we have on growing or getting more money. How do we have fun? And they said, well, we like worshiping together. And I said, all right, let's focus on our worship. Let's just make that as good as we can. And I said, what's the second thing you guys enjoy? And they said, well, we love going out to eat together. And I thought, well, that's pretty simple. We're meeting at 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Let's just go out to lunch every week. And through that process of just having fun, doing two simple things, going out to lunch, building a community, getting to know one another better and kind of celebrating each other's successes as well as our challenges, we began to build it up. And you know what happens when people are having fun? The results begin to come. Other people say, wow, that's kind of a cool community. I'd like to be a part of that. And then it starts growing and all of a sudden more people are in the seats. And then people are like, I want to support that financially. And then they're giving a little more money. And so it grows and grows because you started just having fun and building community in the process. It can also happen if you have a personal goal. So one of the things that I've found is if I set a goal and I say, okay, I want to go to 30,000 steps a day, right? The most linear straight line way to do that would be to just get up and do a 15-mile run, right? Every day. Well, how long do you think that's going to last? Unless you're a hardcore kind of distance runner, how likely is it you're going to get up and say, I'm going to run 15 miles every day before work, no matter what? Probably not going to happen. But if you start deciding you're going to have fun with what you do, here's how I did it. Instead of worrying about 15-mile runs, I decided, all right, I'm going to play some racquetball with some of the guys I like at my gym. And I'm going to play some pickup basketball. And I love to walk my dogs through the neighborhood and just see people and talk to neighbors. So I'm going to walk the dogs and I'm going to do things that I enjoy. Well, do you know what started to happen? My steps started to go up. Not because I was doggedly fixated that I have to have 30,000 steps, but because I figured out in the process, how do I make this fun? And so when we think about going clear back to this group of flute playing losers, by having fun, by stopping the talking and actually doing more repetition on the skills, by building a community which enhanced what we were doing, by developing leaders within the framework of that community, and then by celebrating successes, we began to win. And we actually began to win quite a bit. And we ended up making it to a regional championship game. And we won that regional championship and went on to state with a bunch of kids who a few years earlier, everyone would have said, there is no way. They are just the biggest bunch of flute playing losers. So that's our lesson for today, building the team. And I want to go through kind of a quick wrap up. So if you want to do this and take your team, whatever kind of team it is, whether that's a business team or whether it's a personal goal or whether it's a church or a nonprofit, here are these 5 keys to the flute playing losers. Have fun, stop talking and do more, build community, develop leaders, and celebrate success. And if you do that, you can achieve great things. Now, finally, I want to close us out today with our disclaimer. This episode, again, is a metaphor, and I am not in any way disparaging flute players or band members. In fact, here's a little secret. Back in the day, I played the slide trombone, and I achieved the pinnacle. This was my band pinnacle of first chair in junior high, and I was on the all-city band. Pretty good, huh? So I wanted to add that disclaimer and share the love for all my fellow band geeks out there. Thanks for joining me today on the Super Pumped podcast. If you enjoyed today's show as much as I did, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app and tell your friends about the show so others can find and benefit from the Super Pumped community. And finally, to put the ideas from today's show into action, Visit us at superpump.com to view the show notes, book a complimentary consultation, or take our free business launch readiness assessment. Keep well, and I'll see you next time.